She said, "It's just a little sugar," while my son lay in ICU fighting for his life. But what the doctor found in his blood wasn't candy. It was prescription diet pills. Deliberate. Strong enough to stop his 11-year-old heart. Then came the second gut punch. While I sat beside Daniel's hospital bed, my sister filed for guardianship, claiming I was unfit. She tried to steal my son and collect the payout. But what Karen didn't know was this. I keep records, dates, receipts, every detail. And I'd already started building the case that would destroy her. I just had 10 days to finish it. My name is Michael Whitaker, and I'm 45 years old. Each morning starts with blueprints spread across my workshop desk, coffee steam rising through sawdust-scented air while I check the day's construction projects. My son Daniel, 11 and bright as sunrise, packs his own lunch now, the metal box rattling in my pickup as we head to school. The treehouse we built together casts long shadows by day's end. My sister Karen, once my closest friend, now peppers social media with thinly veiled jabs about being Dad's less favored child. Years in construction taught me to document everything. Each receipt filed, timeline noted, signature preserved in triplicate. When Karen pushes, I swallow my retorts and choose family peace, though that choice weighs heavier lately. But let me start from the beginning. You know what gets me? How normal everything felt that Friday morning. Karen called while I was reviewing permits for a renovation job. Her voice honey-sweet like it always got when she wanted something. "Michael, I've been thinking about Daniel," she said. "He needs more family balance in his life. Let me take him for the weekend." My coffee went cold as she talked. Anyone else might have missed that tiny edge under her warmth, but I'd heard it too many times. Like last Christmas when she posted about certain relatives who always got Dad's attention, right after Daniel showed everyone the wooden train set I'd helped him build. "I don't know, Karen," I said, rubbing my temple. "We've got plans. You can't keep him in your bubble forever." There it was. That familiar dig. One weekend won't kill either of you. I should have trusted my gut. Instead, I checked my calendar, thought about Daniel asking why we never saw his aunt anymore, and heard myself say yes. Maybe you've done the same thing. Chosen peace over instinct, told yourself blood matters more than doubt. Saturday afternoon, I pulled up to Karen's townhouse. Everything looked perfect. Like always. Too perfect. Her kitchen gleamed like a magazine photo, not a crumb or coffee ring in sight. Daniel bounced in, dropping his backpack by her spotless counter while she smiled that camera-ready smile. "We'll have such fun," she said, ruffling his hair. "Won't we, sweetheart?" I forced myself to smile back, for Daniel's sake. "Be good, buddy. Call if you need anything." The drive home felt longer than usual. I kept telling myself the same thing. Family deserves trust. Family means giving second chances. Family couldn't, deliberately hurt their own. 3 hours later, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. My stomach dropped before I even answered. "Mr. Whitaker?" A woman's voice, tight with urgency. "This is Dr. Morris at St. Luke's Emergency Department. Your son Daniel has experienced a cardiac event." The rest blurred. Words like arrhythmia and immediate intervention floated past while my world tilted sideways. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, watching ambulances scream past in the opposite direction, their lights painting everything blood red. Have you ever felt time stretch and snap like a rubber band? That's what it was like, racing to the hospital. 1 minute I was taking corners too fast. The next I was abandoning my truck across 2 spaces in the emergency lot. The fluorescent lights made everything harsh and unreal as I sprinted through the sliding doors. My mouth tasted like pennies. The triage desk swam in front of me. A nurse was already wheeling a small figure through a set of double doors. Daniel, my boy, looking so damn small on that stretcher. Our eyes met for just a second before they disappeared around the corner. "Where is Daniel?" I fought to keep my voice steady, but it cracked anyway. "That's my son." The nurse at the desk barely looked up, just pressed her badge against a sensor. The ICU doors clicked open with a soft hiss, swallowing Daniel into their sterile depths. I stood there, watching those doors swing shut, while the world spun around me. "Sir?" The nurse's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Sir, I need you to fill out these forms." I took the clipboard with numb fingers, but all I could see was Daniel's face, pale and scared, vanishing behind those doors. What the hell had happened at Karen's house? What had she done to my boy? The ICU hit me like a physical thing. You ever walk into a room and instantly know something's wrong even before your brain catches up? That's what it was like. The sharp bite of antiseptic burned my nose, mixing with the steady beep whoosh of machines that seemed too big for the small figure in the bed. Daniel lay there, looking like he'd been carved from paper. Tubes and wires snaked across his chest, disappearing under a thin hospital gown. His dark hair, so much like mine, made a stark contrast against the white pillow. I'd seen him sleep 1,000 times, but this wasn't sleep. This was something else entirely. A doctor appeared at my elbow, her white coat crisp despite the late hour. "Mr. Whitaker, I'm Dr. Chen, the attending cardiologist." She gestured to a chair, but I couldn't sit. Not with Daniel looking like that. "What happened?" My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. Dr. Chen glanced at the monitors, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Your son's blood work showed significant levels of stimulants in his system. The concentration suggests this wasn't accidental exposure." The word stimulants hung in the air, heavier than all the medical equipment combined. My mind raced through our morning routine. The usual breakfast, his packed lunch, nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing that could explain this. "I've already notified the police," she continued. "It's protocol when we see toxicology results like these in a minor." I should have felt angry about that, but a wave of relief hit me instead. Someone else would have to look at this, would have to see what I was already starting to suspect, but couldn't bring myself to name. "How?" I had to clear my throat. "How bad is it?" "We've stabilized him, but we need to monitor his heart closely for the next 24 hours. A knock at the door made us both turn. A man in plain clothes stepped in, badge clipped to his belt. "Detective Morris." He introduced himself, notebook already in hand. "Mr. Whitaker, I understand this has been a difficult evening, but I need to ask you some questions." I nodded, still watching Daniel's chest rise and fall. "Has there been any change in Daniel's routine recently? New medications, different food, unusual stress?" "He was staying with my sister Karen for the weekend," I said. "First time in months. We don't keep any stimulants at home. No diet pills, no attention deficit medication, nothing like that. Daniel's always been healthy." The detective's pen scratched across paper. When he looked up, his expression was carefully neutral, but I recognized that look. It said, "Prove it. Every claim needs backup." I'd worn the same expression, myself, dealing with disputed contracts. "Dr. Chen," he turned to the cardiologist, "could you walk me through the lab results?" "Of course." She picked up Daniel's chart. "I can show you the specific markers we're concerned about." "Where's Karen now?" I asked, the words tasting bitter. "In the waiting room," Detective Morris replied, flipping to a fresh page in his notebook. "We'll need to speak with her as well." I took a step toward the door, but the detective's voice stopped me. "Mr. Whitaker, I'd appreciate it if you'd stay with your son for now." The underlying message was clear. Don't contaminate the investigation. Don't tip your hand. I looked back at Daniel, watching his fingers twitch slightly in his drug-induced sleep. The same fingers that had helped me measure lumber last weekend, that had carefully painted his treehouse walls. You know what's funny? Not funny, haha. But funny strange? How fast your world can flip upside down. That morning, I'd been worried about Karen's usual mind games, her social media jabs, her way of making everything a competition. Now I was standing in a pediatric ICU, watching a detective prepare to question my sister about how my son ended up full of stimulants that could have stopped his heart. I sank into the chair by Daniel's bed, finally understanding why Dr. Chen had offered it earlier. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. The ventilator kept its steady rhythm, and somewhere down the hall, a nurse called for assistance in room 204. Through the window I could see Karen's shadow move past the nurse's station, Detective Morris's broad shoulders following close behind. I found Karen in the waiting room, perched on one of those torture devices they call chairs, dabbing at eyes that hadn't shed a single tear. The fluorescent lights did her no favors, casting harsh shadows that made her practiced concern look more like a cheap mask. Detective Morris sat across from her, his notebook balanced on his knee. I settled into a chair nearby, close enough to hear, but far enough that Karen couldn't pull me into her performance. "So, Mrs. Hendricks," the detective began, "walk me through Daniel's activities today." Karen's hand fluttered to her throat, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when she was building up to something. We had such a normal day. Breakfast, some yard work. She paused, manufacturing concern. He might have found some candy I'd forgotten about. You know how kids are. My jaw clenched. Daniel wasn't some sugar-crazed kid who'd raid a candy stash. He was the same boy who'd helped me calculate lumber requirements last week, double-checking my math because that's the kind of careful he was. "And after the candy?" Detective Morris prompted. "He was running around outside. Maybe he overdid it?" Karen's voice wavered perfectly. "It was so hot today. That's when I caught it." Just a flash, but unmistakable. While the detective was writing, Karen's lips twitched into a smirk. If I hadn't spent 45 years learning her tells, I might have missed it. But there it was, gone as quick as it came, like a snake darting between rocks. Mrs. Hendricks, do you keep any medications in your home? Vitamins, supplements, diet products? Karen laughed, a light, dismissive sound that set my teeth on edge. Oh, just the usual multivitamins. I tried some of those fad diet pills years ago. But who hasn't? She leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. You know what I think? It's all the stress at Michael's place. Construction work, irregular hours, it can't be good for a growing boy. The hell? I straightened in my chair. My work schedule is steady, detective. Has been since I took over the company. Daniel's routines are simple and supervised. He helps with homework club after school, then either comes to the office or stays with our neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, until I'm done for the day. The detective made another note, his face neutral. Mrs. Hendricks, would you consent to a search of your home? Just to rule things out. Of course. Karen's response came too quick, too eager, though I don't see why that's necessary when it's obviously just exhaustion and maybe too much sugar. Detective Morris closed his notebook and leveled a look at both of us. Here's where we stand. Without concrete evidence of how these stimulants got into Daniel's system, we have to work with the most straightforward explanation. Right now, that's what Mrs. Hendricks has provided. Accidental ingestion followed by overexertion. The fury rising in my chest wanted to explode, to point out every hole in Karen's story, every inconsistency in her act. But I'd learned enough from construction disputes to know that emotion without evidence was worse than useless. It was ammunition for the other side. I took a breath, steadying myself like I would before a difficult cut on the table saw. Detective, if you need records, security footage from nearby businesses, timestamps from phones, anything that might help piece this together, I can get those for you. He nodded once, tucking his pen away. That would be helpful, Mr. Whitaker. For now, focus on your son's recovery. We'll be in touch. I stood, my knees cracking from too long in that awful chair. Karen was already gathering her purse, probably planning her next social media post about her poor, suffering nephew. The hallway to the ICU stretched before me like a tunnel, midnight settling into the corners. Each step back to Daniel's room felt heavy with everything I couldn't say, everything I couldn't prove. Yet, you ever notice how silence has different flavors? There's comfortable silence, like when you're working wood and everything's flowing right. There's peaceful silence, like watching your kids sleep after a good day. But this was the silence of a man gathering strength, measuring twice before making the cut that had to be perfect the first time. Morning in the ICU had its own rhythm. The steady beep of monitors, the squeak of nurses' shoes, the ritual drip of terrible coffee into styrofoam. I dozed off in the chair next to Daniel's bed, my neck twisted at an angle that would remind me of this night for days to come. You know that moment when you first wake up, and everything seems normal for a split second? I didn't get that luxury. The weight of yesterday crashed back instantly. Daniel's collapse, Karen's performance in the waiting room, the detective's need for proof. I pulled out my phone, figuring I should let the crew know I'd need coverage for at least a few days. That's when I saw it. An email from the county courthouse, sent at 6:43 a.m. The subject line alone made my coffee go cold in my hand. My fingers felt numb as I opened it. The legal language was dense, but certain phrases jumped out like nails in bare feet. Petitioner Karen Hendricks seeks temporary guardianship. Clear pattern of negligent supervision. Recent medical emergency demonstrates unsafe environment. Immediate intervention required for minor child's well-being. She'd done it. While I sat here watching our father's grandson fight through whatever she'd given him, Karen had been building her case, using Daniel's collapse, the one she caused, as evidence against me. The sheer calculation of it made my stomach turn. Remember that feeling when you're up on a roof beam and your boot slips just an inch? That instant of vertigo before you catch yourself? That's where I was. But the drop this time wasn't 20 feet. It was losing Daniel. I called the courthouse the moment their office opened, my voice steadier than I felt. The clerk's response hit like a hammer. Emergency guardianship hearing is scheduled for October 15th at 9 a.m. 10 days. 10 days to prove Karen had poisoned my son, or I could lose him. I grabbed the hospital notepad and started breaking it down like a project timeline. The list kept growing. Each item spawned 3 more, each of those with their own dependencies and deadlines. Just like a build schedule. Except this time, I wasn't racing weather or permit expiration. I was racing my sister's lawyers. Detective Morris stopped by during rounds. I showed him the guardianship notice. watching his expression shift from professional neutrality to something darker. "This complicates things," he said, choosing his words carefully. "We'll keep the investigation open, but you need to understand. Civil court moves on its own timeline. They won't wait for our findings. Then I'll move faster." I heard the edge in my voice and didn't try to soften it. "Whatever you need to keep this moving, detective. Whatever doors need knocking on, whatever papers need signing. Just tell me where to be." He nodded, probably used to desperate parents making promises. "Focus on what you can prove, Mr. Whitaker. Suspicion isn't evidence." After he left, I texted Mark Alton. He'd been my dad's friend before he was mine, the kind of old-school contractor who'd seen everything twice and kept records of it all. More importantly, he'd fought his own custody battle years back. Karen filed for guardianship. Hearing in 10 days. Need advice. His response came quick. "Come by the yard. Paper beats noise." I looked down at Daniel, still pale against the sheets but breathing easier now. They'd taken out some of the tubes overnight. His hand lay there on the blanket, small, but strong. Those same fingers that had helped me sort nails last weekend. Carefully putting each size in its own jar. I started the timer in my head. 10 days. 240 hours. 14,400 minutes. Each one had to count. Mark's contractor yard hadn't changed since I was a kid trailing after my dad. Same cinderblock office with its metal roof. Same neat rows of equipment under blue tarps. Same smell of diesel and fresh-cut lumber hanging in the morning air. Ever notice how some places just ground you? Like they've got their own gravity? I found Mark by the coffee pot. Gray beard streaked with sawdust. Reading glasses perched on his nose as he worked through invoices. He looked up, took one look at my face, and pulled out the chair across from him. "Sit," he said, pushing aside the paperwork. "Start at the beginning." So I did. Laid it all out. Daniel's collapse, Karen's story about Candy, the stimulants in his system, her guardianship play. Mark didn't interrupt once, just listened with those steady eyes that had seen 40 years of contracts and conflicts. When I finished, he leaned back and pulled open his filing cabinet. "First thing you need to understand about family court," he said, "is that judges love paper. Clean paper. Dated, stamped, signed, indexed paper." He set a thick folder on the desk. "This is from my custody fight in '09. Notice how every claim has backup?" He walked me through it. Medical records with chain of custody documentation, toxicology reports from independent labs, affidavits from character witnesses. Each piece fitted together like a well-built frame. "Here's what we're gonna do," Mark said, reaching for a legal pad. "First, we subpoena those hospital records. Complete workup, not just the summary. Then we get an independent lab to verify their findings. Different lab? Different tech? Same results? That's harder to dismiss." I felt my shoulders unknot slightly. This was familiar territory, breaking down a big job into manageable pieces. What about proving Daniel doesn't have access to stimulants at home? Documentation. Mark tapped his pen. "Take photos of every cabinet, drawer, and shelf. Get the school nurse to certify his medical record. Pull your receipts to show what actually comes into your house. Build the paper trail backward." He showed me how to draft affidavits that would stand up in court, walked me through the notary process, even called his lawyer to get the proper subpoena language. By 11, I had a stack of requests ready to file. "Rush fees are gonna hurt," he warned as I wrote the check for expedited processing. "Don't care," I said. "Every hour counts." I caught the courier service before their noon pickup, handed over the lab specimens myself. The clerk promised results within 48 hours, for triple the standard rate. Detective Morris met me in the hospital cafeteria, coffee untouched between us. "I can share basic findings," he said, "but anything that could compromise the investigation stays sealed. You understand?" "Whatever you can give me," I said. "Karen's lawyers will try to paint this as my negligence. I need to prove otherwise." He slid a thin folder across the table. "Incident report. Initial talk screen. Witness statements. Use them carefully." Back in the ICU, I organized everything into a sealed manila envelope, then sat beside Daniel's bed. The machines kept their steady rhythm while I told him about the treehouse we'd build once he was home. Bigger than the old one, with real windows and a trap door. "Remember how you wanted that pulley system for your backpack?" I asked, watching his chest rise and fall. "We'll add that too. Make it proper this time." My phone buzzed. Confirmation from the lab. Sample received. Processing begun. I checked the timestamp. Day 2 of our countdown was ticking away. Looking at Daniel, I thought about what Mark had said about paper trails. They tell a story if you know how to read them. Right now, they were telling the story of a father who kept his son safe, documented and verified. Karen might have her lies, but I had something better. Proof. And every hour brought us closer to the truth. The email hit my inbox at 3 a.m. I'd been dozing in the ICU chair when my phone lit up the darkness. Preliminary findings from MedTest labs. Marked urgent. Ever notice how some moments feel like they're happening in slow motion? That's how it felt, reading those results line by line. The compounds they found weren't just random stimulants. They were specific prescription diet pills, the kind you see advertised in glossy magazines with before and after photos. I forwarded the report to Detective Morris right away, highlighting the key sections. The dosage levels jumped off the page, way too high for any kind of accident or casual exposure. This wasn't a kid sneaking into a medicine cabinet. This was calculated. "You seeing this?" I texted Morris. His reply came quick. "On it. Stand by." Something clicked in my mind. A memory of Karen's pristine pantry during that last visit. All those wellness bottles lined up like soldiers, their labels promising everything from clean energy to metabolic enhancement. I'd written it off as another of her health kicks, but now? I pulled up Karen's social media, scrolling back through months of posts. There they were, photo after photo of her wellness journey, complete with carefully arranged supplement bottles. "Finally found the perfect metabolism booster," she'd written under one. "Living my best life with these amazing products," under another. My hands were steady as I took screenshots, organized them by date, added them to my growing file. The pattern was right there in her own words and pictures. I drafted a summary for the judge, keeping it clinical and factual. No accusations, just timestamps and evidence. Mark picked up on the first ring when I called. "Diet pills," I said before he could even say hello. Lab confirmed it. "Diet pills," he repeated slowly. "Prescription strength?" "Yeah." "And guess who's been posting about metabolism boosters for the past 6 months?" I heard papers shuffling on his end. "Got your exhibits ready?" "Working on it." Timeline's solid. Karen's social posts, the lab results, Daniel's symptoms, everything lines up. Good. Now practice saying it like you're reading a grocery list. The minute you show anger, you lose credibility. He was right. I spent the next hour rehearsing my presentation, stripping out every trace of the fury that wanted to leak through. Just facts, dates, and evidence. Clean and clear. When Detective Morris called back, his voice had that careful cop neutrality. "The pattern fits," he said. "But we need the source. Those pills had to come from somewhere." "They're in her house," I said. "Has to be. Probably hidden behind all those legitimate supplements. Can't get a warrant on probably. Need more." I looked at my calendar, where I'd been marking off the days. Day 4 stared back at me. I circled the word leverage and added 3 question marks. "How much more?" I asked. "Solid connection between her and the prescription. Right now, all we have is circumstantial." Back in the ICU, Daniel's monitors showed stronger numbers. His color looked better too. Less like printer paper. More like my kid again. When I held his hand, his fingers had more grip than yesterday. "Hey, buddy," I said softly. "We're getting there. Just keep fighting." The nurse came in to check his vitals, nodded approvingly at the readings. "His heart rhythm's stabilizing," she said. "Whatever hit his system is working its way out." I watched her update his chart, thinking about Karen's perfectly organized kitchen, her social media wellness shrine, and those damning lab results. The pieces were there, fitting together like a blueprint. But Morris was right. We needed that last crucial connection. I pulled out my phone and started another search. If Karen was getting prescription pills, there had to be a trail. Money, doctors, pharmacies, something that would connect the dots. You ever have one of those moments where the ground just disappears under your feet? That's what it felt like when I opened that manila envelope from hospital records. The papers inside were crisp, official. Everything we needed to nail down the prescription trail. I started scanning through, my coffee going cold beside me. Then I saw it. The name on the prescription history stopped my heart colder than that coffee. William J. Whitaker, my father's name. I read it 3 times, hoping somehow the letters would rearrange themselves. They didn't. The prescription history showed a string of diet pill refills dating back 2 years before Dad passed. And the kicker? They'd been filled at Morton's Pharmacy, just 3 blocks from my house. You know that feeling when you realize you've walked right into a trap? The pharmaceutical paper trail led straight to my doorstep. In that moment, I could hear Karen's lawyer spinning it to the judge. "Your Honor, These medications were negligently left accessible in Mr. Whitaker's home, where his minor son could find them. My hands started shaking. I'd been so sure we had her cornered, but she'd somehow turned it around, made it look like the pills came from my house, not hers. Classic Karen, always thinking 3 moves ahead while I was still setting up the board. I hit Mark's speed dial, nearly dropping the phone. "She got me," I said when he picked up. "The prescriptions. They're in Dad's name. From our local pharmacy." Mark was quiet for a long moment. "Timeline," he finally said. "When were they filled? What does it matter now? She's gonna—" "Timeline," he cut in. "Always start with the timeline. Get your dates straight, then we'll see what the paper tells us." I spread everything out on the little ICU room table. Prescription dates, refill records, Daniel's lab results. Started drawing lines between them, matching timestamps. But the more I stared at it, the thinner our case felt. Sure, the dates told a story. But would it be enough to counter how bad this looked? The sunset through the hospital window turned everything orange, then purple, then gray. I'd been at it for hours, and all I had to show was a timeline that felt like it was built on wishes and maybes. I walked over to Daniel's bed, my legs heavy. The ventilator whooshed steadily. In, out, in, out. My boy looked so small under those sheets, all those tubes and wires making him seem even more fragile. "I'm sorry, buddy," I whispered. I really thought I had this one figured out. The shame hit me then, full force. Here I was, supposed to be this responsible father, this professional businessman, and I couldn't even keep track of old prescriptions in my own house. The judge would take one look at this and— "Mr. Whitaker." Detective Morris stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable in the dim light. He must have seen something in my face. The defeat, maybe, or just plain exhaustion. "Sir?" I managed. He stepped into the room, glanced at my scattered papers, then back at me. "Insurance claims," he said. "What?" "Check her insurance claims." He said it slowly, deliberately, like each word carried weight I wasn't seeing yet. I stared at him, the gears in my head starting to turn. Insurance. Why would that— But he was already heading out, pausing just long enough to tap his watch, a reminder that the clock was still ticking. I looked up at the wall calendar, where I'd been Xing off the days. Day 5. Less than a week left before the hearing that could take Daniel away from me. My hand was steady as I reached for my laptop. Insurance claims. It wasn't much, but right then, it felt like the first solid lead I'd had since those prescription records knocked me flat. I pulled up a fresh document and started typing search parameters. Whatever Karen had going on with insurance, I was going to find it. Because that detective wouldn't have dropped that hint if it was nothing. Sometimes the smallest thread can unravel the biggest lies. I just had to pull the right one. Ever pull an all-nighter with nothing but coffee and desperation to keep you going? That was me, hunched over my laptop in that dim ICU room, the monitors soft beeping like a countdown clock in my head. You learn a few things running a construction business. One of them being that paperwork isn't just paper, it's architecture. Every form connects to another form. Every signature leads to a trail, and somewhere in all those layers, the truth usually hides in plain sight. I started with the basics, pulling up standard records request templates. But insurance companies don't just hand over their files because you ask nicely. You've got to speak their language, hit all the right legal notes. Thank God for the courthouse records desk. They had sample language that could make even a desperate father sound properly official. Medical records pursuant to civil case 2023 CV 4891, I typed, adding every relevant statute number I could find. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I crafted separate requests for each of Karen's known insurance carriers. Had to be thorough. Had to be precise. Mark called around midnight. "How's it coming?" "Slowly," I admitted, rubbing my eyes. "But I think I'm onto something. Been reading through policy documents online. The ones insurance companies have to make public. And there's this clause that keeps showing up, about benefits for care duties when a dependent has a medical crisis." My voice tightened. "Care duties, Mark. Like what you'd need if you suddenly became someone's legal guardian." He went quiet for a moment. "She wouldn't she?" I glanced at Daniel's sleeping form. This whole guardianship push. What if it's not just about hurting me? What if there's a payday attached? I heard him shuffling papers on his end. "You're subpoenaing any claims she's filed?" "Working on it now. Already talked to Detective Morris. He's helping me word things so nothing gets thrown out on technicalities." "Smart. How much time we got?" I checked my watch. The numbers blurred slightly. 48 hours, give or take. After that, I swallowed hard. After that, We're out of runway before this hearing steamrolls us. Then we work faster, Mark said simply. The next few hours were a blur of legal terminology and triple-checking details. Every subpoena had to be perfect. No loopholes, no wiggle room. I set up alerts for every possible way a response could come in. Email pings, fax notifications, courier tracking numbers. Around 4 in the morning, I took a break to stretch my legs. Walked over to Daniel's bed, his small hand cool in mine. "We're gonna handle this quiet," I whispered. "No big scenes, no drama, just the truth on paper, where it can't be twisted." The memory of building his treehouse floated back. How we'd measured twice, cut once, made sure every joint was true. Some things you just have to do right the first time. I was back at the laptop when Detective Morris stopped by on his early rounds. "Got your draft requests," he said, handing me some marked-up papers. "Made a few tweaks to keep them admissible. You'll want to file these first thing." "Thanks." I scanned his notes. "Any word on your end?" He shook his head. "Let's just say we're both very interested in what those insurance records might show." The sun was coming up by the time I had everything ready to file. I'd arranged for a courier to be waiting at the courthouse doors when they opened. Now all I could do was wait. I stood by the ICU room door, watching the hallway traffic pick up as the day shift arrived. Somewhere out there, a manila envelope was making its way through the system. Maybe it held nothing. Maybe it held everything. My phone buzzed. The courier service confirming pickup. I checked my watch. 8 hours since Detective Morris had dropped that insurance hint. 40 hours until the hearing. The game clock was running down, but for the first time since those prescription records blindsided me, I felt like we might have a play. Ever notice how the biggest moments tend to show up when you're running on empty? The courier knocked just as I was pouring my third coffee of the morning. My hands were already shaking from caffeine and lack of sleep, but when I saw those thick manila envelopes, everything went steady. Funny how clarity works that way. I spread the contents across the small table they'd brought into Daniel's ICU room. The insurance claim forms fanned out like playing cards, each one a piece of the puzzle Karen thought she'd hidden so carefully. You know that feeling when you're looking at something that just fits? When all those nagging questions suddenly have answers? The first form hit me like a hammer. There it was in black and white, Karen declaring care responsibilities for Daniel. The date jumped out at me. The exact weekend everything went sideways. She'd even checked boxes about ongoing supervision needs and medical monitoring requirements. My coffee went cold while I dug deeper. The payout schedule made me whistle low. Base compensation was bad enough, but there were multipliers. Guardian status would triple the monthly amounts. Triple. I circled those numbers in red, each zero feeling like another twist of the knife. "You seeing this?" I asked Detective Morris when he stopped by. He leaned over my shoulder, squinting at my hastily arranged timeline. "Walk me through it," he said, pulling up a chair. I laid it out piece by piece. Karen files her guardianship petition 3 hours after Daniel hits the ER. Same day, literally the same day, she opens these claims. Then look here. I pointed to the follow-up documentation. She specifically references a stimulant incident as justification for expanded care needs. The detective picked up one of the forms, studying the timestamps. "She had this planned, down to the minute," I agreed. The memory of her smirk in the waiting room hit different now. She needed Daniel sick enough to justify intervention, but not so sick I couldn't finish the sentence. "Remember how I told you about keeping good records? All those years of careful paperwork habits kicked in hard. I started methodically processing everything, the way I would with a complicated build project, one step at a time. No rushing, no mistakes. I checked every document's metadata. Dates, times, submission codes, had each page notarized, made triple copies, built an exhibit list that could walk even a blind man through the connection between the lab results, Karen's lightning-fast petition, and these damning insurance claims. Detective Morris watched me work for a while, then made a call. "Yeah, we've got it," he said to someone. "Clear fraud pattern." "Yes, sir. I'll send everything over." He hung up and nodded to me. "Prosecutor's office is interested. Very interested." I packed it all into fresh binders, neat and organized. Labeled the crate Day 7 in bold marker. 7 days since Daniel collapsed. 7 days of Karen thinking she'd played this perfectly. The machines keeping track of Daniel's heart made their steady beeping sounds while I sat beside him. His color was better today. Less gray. More like himself. "Hey, buddy," I said quietly, taking his hand. "Remember when we built that rope swing? How I made you test every knot before we used it? Truth's kind of like that. Takes longer to do it right, but that's how you make it hold. The morning sun was pushing through the window blinds, making stripes across his blanket. I felt something unlock in my chest. Not relief exactly, but maybe its cousin. We had a real case now. Something solid. Something that would breathe in front of a judge. Lies move fast, I told Daniel, brushing his hair back. Truth moves slower, but it moves. And when it does, I thought about Karen's smirk again. When it does, it doesn't stop until the job's done. I checked my watch. We were moving into the hearing week now. The binders sat ready in their crate. Each page a brick in the wall we'd build between Karen and her schemes. For the first time since this nightmare started, I didn't feel like I was fighting shadows. You can fake a lot of things in this world, but paper trails, they've got a way of telling their own story. Showdown. The courthouse hit me with that familiar smell of floor polish and old paper the minute I walked in. 10 days. We'd made it to day 10, and everything I'd gathered was about to matter or collapse. You know that feeling when you're checking the level on a beam, and everything hangs on whether the bubble sits true? That's how my gut felt, watching the gallery fill up. Mark squeezed my shoulder as he took his seat behind me. The bailiff called us to order, and I stood, straightening my tie. The blue one Daniel helped me pick last Father's Day. Your Honor, I began, keeping my voice steady like I was walking a client through a build plan. I'm requesting denial of the guardianship petition pending completion of an active criminal investigation. The words came out clear and measured, just like I'd practiced. I walked the judge through it step by step. The stimulant exposure confirmed by hospital labs, backed up by our independent toxicology report. Then Karen's suspiciously timed guardianship filing. My hands didn't shake once as I handed up the exhibits. Objection, Your Honor. Karen's attorney shot up like a spring. This is pure speculation meant to malign my client. The judge, older woman, sharp eyes behind reading glasses, glanced up from the lab results. Overruled for now. But Mr. Whitaker, I need to understand motive here. These are serious implications. That's when I pulled out the insurance documents. Remember those multipliers I mentioned? I laid out the timeline. Karen's claim submission time-stamped barely. Hours after Daniel hit the ER, the guardianship petition filed right after, and those carefully worded notes about stimulant incidents that would justify expanded care needs. The gallery got real quiet. You could almost hear the dates clicking together in everyone's head. Even Karen's attorney shifted in his chair. And the prescription history? The judge asked, tapping a paper. These medications were registered under your late father's name. How do we know they weren't accessible in your home? I'd been waiting for this. I pulled out our detailed home inventory logs, plus the chain of custody documentation, showing all prescription items had been properly disposed of through the pharmacy take-back program right after Dad's funeral. Dates, signatures, witness statements, everything squared and leveled. Detective Morris, the judge called. You can confirm an active criminal investigation? The detective stood. Yes, Your Honor. The evidence suggests a premeditated pattern consistent with insurance fraud and child endangerment. We're coordinating with the prosecutor's office. Karen's face had gone still as stone. You know that moment when someone realizes their perfect plan isn't so perfect? That's what I saw watching her. The judge set down her papers and leaned forward, elbows on the bench. Her expression gave away nothing. Reminded me of my poker-playing uncle who could bluff with the best of them. Ms. Whitaker, she said, I'd like to hear your response to these allegations. Under oath, please. Karen smoothed her sleeve as she stood up, one of her nervous tells from way back. The gallery went quiet enough to hear paper rustling. She turned slightly, catching my eye for just a second before facing the judge. The same hands that had helped me build Daniel's first Lego set were clasped tightly in front of her. The same sister who'd held my son as a baby was about to either tell the truth or dig herself deeper. The moment stretched like a wire about to snap. I felt Mark's presence behind me, solid as a foundation wall. The detective's notepad was open, pen ready, and somewhere in the pediatric ward across town, Daniel was getting stronger, unaware that his whole future hung on what would happen in the next few minutes. Karen drew in a breath, and the gallery leaned forward as one. The situation in my brother's home was complete chaos. Karen's voice carried that familiar righteous tone I'd heard at 100 family gatherings. There were bottles and medications everywhere. I was terrified for Daniel's safety. I kept my face neutral, just like when dealing with difficult clients who try rewriting contract terms. You learn in construction that the paperwork always tells the true story. Without a word, I slid the first photo across the counsel table. It showed my medicine cabinet, organized, child-locked, and notably empty except for basic first aid supplies. Each image was dated, stamped, and verified by a home inspector. Next came the inventory receipts from Dad's estate sale, highlighting how we'd properly disposed of all prescriptions through the pharmacy take-back program. Ms. Whitaker, Detective Morris stood, his weathered face grave. I have here insurance claims you filed within hours of Daniel's hospitalization. You self-reported as his primary caregiver and cited a stimulant incident to justify increased benefits. Can you explain the timing? Karen's attorney jumped up. Objection. This line of questioning exceeds the scope of a guardianship hearing. Your Honor, I interjected. The timing directly relates to motivation for the petition. The judge adjusted her glasses. I'll allow it. The timing is relevant to the guardianship request. Objection overruled. Karen's fingers drummed against the podium. I was simply being proactive about Daniel's care needs. Proactive? The detective opened his notebook. You filed for benefits before doctors had even stabilized your nephew. The claim language matches phrases used in your guardianship petition almost word for word. Objection! Karen's attorney again. Sustained, the judge cut in. Detective, please limit your comments to the verified timeline. The judge turned to me. Mr. Whitaker, do you have any final clarifications before I rule? I stood, feeling the weight of Mark's steady presence behind me. Your Honor, the facts are simple. My sister used my son's body to open insurance policies, file claims, and attempt to seize custody. The documentation shows premeditation, not protection. The gallery murmured as the judge conferred quietly with her clerk. My hands were steady as I gathered the exhibits. Years of setting trusses teaches you to stay balanced when everything's on the line. The judge lifted her pen. Based on the evidence presented, I am denying the petition for temporary guardianship. She signed the order with a firm stroke. Furthermore, given the serious nature of the allegations supported here today, I'm instructing the bailiffs to hold Ms. Whitaker pending review by the prosecutor's office. Karen's face went chalk white. In the gallery, a reporter's pen scratched against paper, catching every detail of her reflection in the polished bench. Counsel, the judge continued, I'm scheduling a criminal arraignment window for next week. Be prepared to address both the fraud allegations and potential child endangerment charges. She looked directly at Karen. Ms. Whitaker, I suggest you secure criminal defense representation immediately. The bailiff moved toward Karen, his steps measured and professional. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. That heavy pause before a thunderstorm breaks. The judge raised her gavel. We're adjourned. The sharp crack of wood on wood echoed through the suddenly silent courtroom. As if that sound had broken a dam, the hallway outside erupted with the rapid-fire clicks of camera shutters. I gathered my files, each page and photo a brick in the wall of truth I'd built to protect my son. Karen stood frozen as the bailiff approached, her perfect plan crumbling like poorly mixed concrete. The charges hit like hammer blows in the quiet courtroom. Insurance fraud, 6 counts. Child endangerment, 2 counts. Each one echoed off the walnut panels as the clerk read them into the record. Behind me, I heard Mark's satisfied grunt, the sound a veteran craftsman makes when a joint finally seats true. Karen's perfect posture crumpled as the bailiff approached with handcuffs. The steel clicked shut around her wrists, and I thought of all the times those same hands had held Daniel as a baby, had waved at backyard barbecues, had pointed accusingly at me during family arguments. Now they were bound behind her back, and the sight gave me no joy, just a bone-deep weariness. You ever notice how the biggest moments in life tend to happen under fluorescent lights? The hospital waiting room, the late-night courthouse halls, and now this, watching my sister shuffle toward a side door in custody, while reporters scribbled furiously in their notepads. I didn't have to wait long to see their work. The next morning's papers landed with headlines that felt like epitaphs. Local woman poisons nephew in insurance scheme. Family betrayal. Aunt plotted against brother's son. Child endangerment case rocks community. Each story painted Karen exactly as she was. A predator who'd turned on her own blood. No PR firm could spin this away. No social media campaign could rewrite what she'd done. The truth had its own gravity, and it pulled her reputation into a black hole she dug herself. Dr. Matthews, the cardiologist who'd first spotted the stimulants, handed me Daniel's discharge papers with a smile. His heart rhythm is completely normal now. Just keep him on a regular schedule, plenty of rest, and follow up with his pediatrician next week. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than those 2 words could carry. For everything. Detective Morris caught us in the lobby. He'd shed his formal court suit for his usual rumpled blazer. You built a solid case, he said, extending his hand. Clean evidence, clear timeline. Made our job easier. I shook his hand. Learned it from my dad. In construction, you document everything or the whole project can collapse. The drive home felt different, lighter somehow. Daniel dozed in the passenger seat, and I kept stealing glances at him, watching his chest rise and fall in the easy rhythm of healing sleep. When we pulled into the driveway, his eyes opened and went straight to the backyard. "Can we check on my treehouse?" I smiled. "Better than that. We're going to rebuild it." Over the next few days, we stripped the old platform down to its bones. I showed Daniel how to check for rot, how to measure twice before cutting, how to sink screws at just the right angle. We added thicker joists for better support, smoothed every rail to prevent splinters, and laid new planks that would hold firm for years to come. "Hand me that brush?" Daniel asked, carefully dipping it in the forest green paint we'd picked together. He worked with the focus I recognized from my own younger days, when Dad first taught me how to level a beam. The fresh pine scent mixed with paint fumes in the afternoon air. From up on our rebuilt perch, you could see clear across the neighborhood, past the houses and streets where we'd walked, through darker days, all the way to the horizon where newer, better stories waited. "This is our fortress now," I told Daniel, running my hand along the finished railing. "Built right, built to last." He nodded, adding one final stroke of paint. "Nobody can hurt us up here." "You know what my dad used to tell me?" I said, watching Daniel's face light up at the mention of the grandfather he barely remembered. "He said pride is earned, not stolen." Daniel tested the words like he was tasting them. "Earned, not stolen," he repeated, and I heard the understanding in his voice, young but growing stronger, like fresh wood gaining its strength. The sun caught his smile as he climbed up to his favorite spot, and his laughter echoed through the branches, the sound of a heart fully healed.